everyone. What if I told you that one hidden problem is silently fueling diabetes, obesity, PCOS, fatty liver, and even heart diseases? Your body's ability to regulate blood sugar is not just important, it's a survival mechanism. When this system breaks down, it does not just create one problem, it triggers a cascade. By the end of this video, you will understand the complete chain. What insulin actually does, how diabetes develops, what insulin resistance really means, and most importantly, the root cause that ties it all together. But to understand insulin resistance, we must first understand insulin itself. So, without wasting any time, let's get started. So, what exactly is insulin? In simple terms, insulin is a peptide hormone. Basically, it's a special protein messenger made up of amino acids that our body produces to send signals. Now, understand this. Every time we eat, especially carbohydrates, our blood sugar rises, right? That sugar or glucose is floating around in our bloodstream. But here is the thing, it cannot just stay there forever. Our body needs to do something with it, and that's where insulin comes in. Insulin's main job is to take out that glucose away and store it either in our muscles as energy, in our liver as backup fuel, or if there is too much, as fat. This is the reason why we call insulin as storage hormone, because it stores energy. Let me give you a simple analogy that will make this crystal clear. Imagine that your cells are like locked doors, and inside each room is where energy gets used. Now, glucose is knocking on the door trying to get inside, but the door is locked, and for that lock, insulin is the key. When insulin arrives, it unlocks the door, or more accurately, it unlocks special gates on the cell surface called receptors. Once unlocked, glucose can enter into our cells and be used for energy or stored for later use. So, without the key, that is insulin, glucose cannot enter into our cells. It just piles up outside in our bloodstream, and that creates a problem. We will discuss about that soon. But for now, let's understand where does insulin actually comes from. Let's talk about the organ behind it all. So, where does insulin actually come from? Well, it comes from our pancreas, a small flat organ sitting behind our stomach. Now, the pancreas wears two hats. It's a digestive hormone that releases enzymes to break down food. But it is also an endocrine organ, meaning it releases hormones directly into our bloodstream. And one of those hormones is, you guessed it, insulin. Inside our pancreas, there are tiny clusters of cells called the islets of Langerhans. These islets have different types of cells, but the star of our story is the beta cells. Beta cells have one critical job: produce and release insulin. Got it? Good. Now let's see how this all works in real time. Here is what exactly happens when we eat. Let's say we eat a bowl of rice or a piece of fruit. Our digestive system breaks down carbohydrates into glucose, and that glucose gets absorbed into our bloodstream. Eventually, our blood sugar starts to rise. Now, the beta cells are incredibly smart. They constantly monitor our blood, and the moment they detect rising glucose, they get into action. The beta cells release insulin into our bloodstream. Insulin then travels to our muscles, liver and fat cells, unlocking them so that glucose could enter and be used or stored. This whole process happens within minutes of eating. It's fast, it's precise, and it's automatic. Fascinating, right? Now, here is something crucial to understand. Insulin is not released all the time. It's not a constant drip, it's demand based. Our body only releases insulin when it needs, meaning when our blood sugar rises. If we are fasting or we have not eaten anything for like hours, our insulin levels drop. Our body is smart. It knows what it needs and when it needs it. At least that's how it's supposed to work. So now we understand how insulin is released. What exactly does it do when it enters into our bloodstream? Let's break that down next. Alright, so insulin is released. Now what? Well, insulin does not just lower down our blood sugar and call it a day. It does a lot more than that. Let's break down all the jobs that insulin has in our body one by one. First and foremost, insulin helps glucose enter our cells. Remember our lock and key analogy? Once insulin unlocks the cell door, glucose can finally get inside. Now the question is, where does it go? Well, it goes into our muscle cells where glucose enters to fuel movement and activity. Fat cells also take in glucose, and if there is any excess glucose that our muscles don't need, insulin directs it to our fat cells where glucose gets converted and stored as fat. So, insulin is like the gatekeeper. Basically, it decides where does glucose go. But insulin does not stop there. It's also a storage promoter. When glucose enters into our liver and muscles, insulin tells them to link those glucose molecules together in order to make long chains called glycogen. You can think of glycogen as your body's short-term battery pack. When we need instant energy, like when we are doing workout or between our meals, our body breaks down glycogen back into glucose. Now, here is the part that most people don't like hearing. When we eat more than our body actually needs, like when we eat more carbohydrates, more calories, insulin promotes fat storage. It converts excess glucose into fat and tucks it away in our fat cells for long-term storage. So, it's like insulin is saying, we have plenty of fuel right now. Let's store that extra one for later use. Now, here is where it gets interesting. Insulin does not just store, it also blocks. Understand this. When insulin is high, our body cannot burn fat. Insulin literally puts brake on fat breakdown. Why? Because our body's logic is, we just ate. We have glucose. We don't need to tap into fat stores right now. Similarly, insulin stops our liver from making ketones, which is an alternative fuel source that our body uses when glucose is low. So, high insulin means no need for backup fuel. We are running on glucose. So, you might have got a bit confused after consuming these many information, right? Let me make it super clear. When insulin is elevated, our body is storing energy. Glucose goes into cells, glycogen gets stocked, fat gets stored, and fat burning is turned off. But when insulin is low, like when we are fasting or sleeping, our body switches gears. It starts breaking down glycogen, burning fat, and even producing ketones for fuel. Our body cannot do both at the same time. We are either storing or burning, and insulin is the switch. Now, insulin is not working alone. There is another hormone that balances it out. Any guess which hormone that could be? Now here is the thing about our body. It loves balance. Insulin lowers our blood sugar. But what if our blood sugar drops too low? What if we have not eaten anything for like hours? That's when glucagon comes in. Glucagon is insulin's opposite. It's counter-regulatory hormone. While insulin says store, glucagon says release. And just like insulin, glucagon also comes from pancreas but from different cells called the alpha cells within the same islets of Langerhans. So what exactly does glucagon do? Well, it raises our blood sugar. Understand this. When our blood sugar starts dropping, maybe when we skip our meals or when we are sleeping through the night, our alpha cells release glucagon. Glucagon breaks down glycogen back into glucose. Remember that glycogen was stored in the liver and muscles? Glucagon tells the liver, hey, break down that glycogen into glucose and release it into the bloodstream. It's like we are withdrawing money from our savings account when we need it. Glucagon also tells our body to start making glucose from other sources like amino acids through a process called gluconeogenesis. So, the bottom line is glucagon keeps our blood sugar from crashing. Overall, insulin and glucagon are constantly adjusting in order to keep our blood sugar level in a healthy range. Not too low, not too high. Here is the key insight. It's not just about having insulin. It's about the balance between insulin and glucagon. If insulin is always high and glucagon is always suppressed, maybe because we are eating all day, snacking constantly or consuming too many carbs, we stay stuck in storage mode. We never switch to fat burning mode. Our body never gets a break, and that constant insulin, that's when our system starts to break down. So what really happens if we push this system too hard for years? Let's talk about that next. Let me clear up a huge misconception. A lot of people think that insulin just runs out or gets all used up, like our pancreas has a limited supply of insulin. That's not true. In fact, our pancreas can keep making insulin. The real problem is that our cells stop listening to it. Think of it like this. Imagine knocking on a door. At first, when you knock, the door opens. But over time, the person inside starts ignoring you. So, you knock louder and louder until you are just banging in order to get noticed. The same thing happens with our insulin. This could happen when we constantly eat high carb meals and keep insulin elevated for years. Our cells become numb to insulin's signal. The insulin is there, it's knocking and knocking, but the cells are not responding. So, as a result, our body compensates. Our pancreas think blood sugar level is not coming down. We need more insulin and it pumps out even more. Now, we have much higher levels of insulin just to do the same job. This is called hyperinsulinemia, which means chronically high insulin in our blood. Now, here is the scary part. This happens even before diabetes. Our blood sugar level might still look normal because that extra insulin is working overtime. But our insulin levels are sky high, and high insulin levels can cause problems like more fat storage, constant hunger, weight gain even without overeating. We are stuck in storage mode and cannot burn fat. This is the silent stage most people miss. This is the tipping point. Our cells are now resistant. Our insulin is through the roof. Our pancreas is overworked. If this continues for years, our pancreas eventually gets exhausted. The beta cells wear out and cannot keep up anymore. As a result, insulin production drops. Blood sugar finally rises out of control, and that's when we get diagnosed with diabetes. Alright, let's talk about type 1 diabetes. And it's crucial we understand this clearly because type 1 diabetes is completely different from what we have been discussing. So, type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune condition. This means that our body's own immune system mistakenly attacks the beta cells in our pancreas, the very cells that produce insulin. It's not because of our diet, lifestyle, or eating too much of sugar. It's the immune system gone rogue, treating beta cells like foreign invaders and wiping them out. And once those beta cells are destroyed, they are gone. Our pancreas can no more produce insulin or produce very little. This usually happens in childhood or adolescence, though it can occur at any age. And it usually happens all of a sudden, like within weeks or months. For people with type 1 diabetes, insulin injections are not optional. It's life-saving. Without insulin, glucose cannot enter into the cells. It piles up inside the blood while the cells starve. The body starts breaking down fat and muscle for energy, producing dangerous acids like ketones, leading to a life-threatening condition called diabetic ketoacidosis. This is why type 1 diabetics must take insulin every day. They should keep monitoring their blood sugar level constantly, and they should balance their food, activity, and medication. Here is the key distinction that you should remember. Type 1 diabetes equals a lack of insulin. The pancreas is not making it. The problem is not resistance, it's absence. Now, type 2 is completely different and far more common. Let's understand how. Now, let's talk about type 2 diabetes, and this is completely different from type 1. In type 2, our pancreas are still making insulin. The problem is it's not working properly anymore. Type 2 diabetes develops slowly in 3 different stages. Stage 1 is when our cells stop listening to insulin. We eat, insulin gets released, but glucose cannot get into cells easily. Stage 2 is when our pancreas makes more and more insulin to force the glucose in. Now, our insulin levels are really high all the time, but our blood sugar still looks okay. You don't even know there is a problem yet. This can last for years. And stage 3 is when our pancreas gets tired. It's been working overtime for so long that it starts wearing out. It cannot make enough insulin anymore. And now, as a result, our blood sugar shoots up and boom, we are diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. So, what really causes this? Well, 3 main things. First is diet. Eating too much sugar, white rice, bread and junk food keeps our insulin high all the time. Second is not moving enough. When we don't exercise or even walk throughout the day, our muscles don't use glucose and so our cells become lazy and stop responding to insulin. And the third is belly fat, especially the deep fat around our organs. This fat releases chemicals that make this condition more worse. Now, here is what you need to remember. Type 2 diabetes is not about missing insulin at first. We have plenty of insulin and sometimes too much. The problem is our cells won't just listen to the insulin. Insulin shortage might happen later when our pancreas just give up. So, what really causes this type 2 diabetes at the root level? Let's discuss that. So, we have finally arrived at the core of this video, insulin resistance. Let me give you a clear definition. Insulin resistance means our cells stop responding to insulin properly. The insulin is there knocking on the door, but the cells have become deaf to the signal. They won't open up and let glucose in as they are supposed to. So, why does this really happens? Well, there are 2 main reasons for this. First is constant high glucose. When we eat sugary foods, refined carbs and processed junk all day long, our blood sugar is constantly elevated. Our cells are getting bombarded with glucose and insulin non-stop. Eventually, they become overwhelmed and stop responding. Second is frequent insulin spikes. Every time we eat, especially carbs, insulin spikes. If we are eating 6 meals a day, snacking constantly or grazing all the time, insulin never gets a chance to drop. Our cells are exposed to high insulin 24/7 and over time, they adapt by becoming resistant. It's a protective mechanism gone all wrong. Now, here is where things gets interesting. Not all cells resist insulin the same way. Muscle cells, fat cells and liver cells behave completely different under insulin resistance. Our muscle cells become resistant first. They stop taking in glucose efficiently and so sugar stays in our blood longer. Our fat cells ironically often stay somewhat sensitive to insulin, which means they keep storing fat even when muscles won't take glucose. That's why people with insulin resistance keeps gaining weight, especially around their belly. But liver? The liver becomes resistant too, and it causes a huge problem. Normally, insulin tells the liver to stop making new glucose, right? But when the liver is insulin resistant, it ignores that signal and keeps pumping out glucose even when our blood sugar is already high. So now we have glucose coming in from food and glucose being overproduced by our liver. That's a double hit. And as a result, our blood sugar skyrockets, our pancreas releases even more insulin to compensate, and the vicious cycle deepens. This is the insulin resistance, the root cause driving type 2 diabetes, obesity, PCOS, fatty liver, and so many other metabolic diseases. So it's like you fix insulin resistance and you fix the foundation. So let's bring it all together. Insulin is the key that unlocks our cells to let glucose in for energy or storage. When we constantly eat too much sugar and carbs, our cells stop listening to insulin, and that's insulin resistance. Over time, our pancreas works harder, pumps out more insulin, eventually burns out, and that's how we get type 2 diabetes, obesity, fatty liver, and other metabolic problems. I hope that this video helped you in understanding what insulin resistance actually is more deeply. If you learned anything new from this video, then you can let me know by hitting that like button and share it with your friends and family so that they can also understand how insulin resistance works and how it can lead to metabolic diseases. Drop a comment telling me what topic you want me to explain next that is related to insulin resistance. Subscribe my channel for more such videos and press the bell icon to be updated. And I will see you in the next video. Until then, peace out and remember, wellness over everything. Thanks for watching.